listening to Take 22, a media production podcast hosted by Matt Gray.
Welcome to episode 2 of Take 22. I am Matt Gray. It's the day after Christmas, and I couldn't be happier, and I'm going to tell you why. But first, before I get into what I'm really excited about, I want to let anybody listening know that this is a good time to go subscribe to the INDIEEYE Film Awards podcast. We're going to have 2 episodes coming out this week, and then we're dropping bonus episodes, full-length interviews with some of the directors and actors that we've been involved with through INDIEEYE throughout 2021. And these are really some can't-miss interviews. If you're into media production, you're into filmmaking, it's an opportunity to hear some really good insight from these people who are also working at an indie level and trying to build a resume, improve their careers, and I think you'll be really surprised by some of the things you hear from them. And we're going to have our regular December awards, our monthly awards for INDIEEYE, but then we have an annual awards podcast that's dropping. And then on January 2nd, we'll begin releasing the interviews in their own standalone podcast episodes. So tons of content coming out from INDIEEYE. And you can find that on YouTube. You can find it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Or you can go to INDIEEYEFilmAwards.com and find pretty much any link you need right from there. So anyways, or hey, if you're an indie filmmaker and you have something to submit and you want to jump in on the competition, let's see it in January, or when you're finished, let's see it when you have it done. It's a monthly online film festival, and Dre and I do a podcast every month to discuss the winners and some of the other submissions. So it's an opportunity just to get some feedback on what you've created or win some laurels. But I really think the most important part is that you're hearing feedback about other people's films and you're hearing about other people's experiences, and there's so much to learn through that. Like, getting feedback on your own project is really nice, but if you can hear things about other films that highlight their successes or what they're doing right, or maybe some things that could have been a little bit better from a creative or a technical standpoint, that just helps. Well, in my opinion anyways. But I want to get right to what I'm most excited to talk about. Because in the first episode of Take 22, I was looking forward to getting my Sony A7IV. And the original release date was December 30th. And I was thinking, I'm probably not going to make it in the first batch. I'll probably be in the second batch. And if I get my camera by the beginning of February, I'll be really happy with that. But right after that episode was published, I noticed on Amazon and B&H, where I ordered the camera on B&H, but I noticed that their release date had changed. The shipping was no longer going to be December 30th. It moved up to December 23rd, which was really surprising. That's generally not the case with brand new cameras, and particularly with Sony. And with the shipping the way it is and chip shortages and blah, 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 I just assumed this wasn't going to happen anytime soon. And while seeing the expected shipping date move up was really cool, I was also still kind of pessimistic about actually being in the first run of the cameras. And a couple of days after I noticed this, I saw that I was charged for the camera, which means that they're shipping it. They don't charge you until they're shipping it. So at that point, I knew they had a unit for me, and my B&H status changed from, I think it was like back ordered to a new order and order in progress. And I'm jumping into Reddit and other sites other forums where they're talking about their A7IV shipping and notifications and things like that. And I'm trying to find out, okay, who's getting a camera? And I'm seeing that some people in the United States were saying that their order was shipped, or their local camera store had it, but wasn't able to sell it to them or let them pick it up until the 23rd. So it sounded like there was probably quite a few bodies out there, a lot of units of this A7IV out there, and I'm getting a little more excited. But it was also the week of Christmas. We're a couple of days from Christmas. Surely there's no way B&H and FedEx are going to be able to get my camera out and to me, and they're on the East Coast and I'm in California. So certainly I'm not going to have the camera in hand probably until a week after Christmas or so. Well, I was wrong. Not only did Sony have the camera available early for these retailers, B&H was processing them like crazy, getting the orders out, and FedEx had it here. And I didn't pay for faster shipping or overnight or anything like that, just regular shipping, because I really wasn't anticipating the camera so soon. But they got it into my hands on Christmas Eve day, which, by the way, is my favorite day of the year. And not only did I get it on Christmas Eve day, I think FedEx showed up about 10:30 in the morning, which was perfect because then I had enough time. I mean, I was so excited. Couldn't believe not only was I included in the first run of this camera, and Christmas Eve is really special to us because we have a giant family gathering every Christmas Eve. It's very, very important. And I love to be able to take photos and video as much as I can. I mean, I try not to make it a work thing. Often when I'm wanting to just have a camera and use it in family situations or things where I just want to take some shots and remember things, I always feel like I'm working, and I hate that feeling. But I just love to capture our family memories, so I deal with it. And on Christmas Eve, well, let's just say that's the one night a year I'm going to allow myself to socially drink as much as I want. So it could get risky. Several drinks in, walking around with cameras and lenses, but usually I'm very careful. But thankfully, this Christmas Eve, I had the A7IV in hand to use at our family gathering, and I love it. And I've been shooting with my A7S3 for about 6 weeks without having my A7 III, which is a higher megapixel camera. And I got it early enough that day that I was able to go into the menus and customize things the way I prefer them to be and practice with the camera before the evening. And it's fantastic. I mean, I knew this was going to be a great camera. It's no surprise. The Sony A7IV is a great camera. But I didn't anticipate loving this new mode dial switch so much. It's incredibly handy. And I'm frequently, as a hybrid shooter, I'm frequently going back and forth between photo and video, and having this switch that enables you to do that easier, slightly easier than using the traditional mode dial that Sony has had. It's just fantastic. And I really didn't think I personally would notice a big difference with the autofocus. I mean, the A7 III is pretty decent with autofocus. It's not up there with your A9s and the newer bodies of Sony, and even my A7S III, my FX3. The autofocus is better, but I didn't think I'd notice a significant improvement. And the A7 IV really has autofocus that's way more snappy than the A7 III. And it even feels like it's better than the A7S III. I don't know the specifics of that. Maybe it is. But it was grabbing eye autofocus and face autofocus all night, no problems, really snappy, really fast. And with the 33 megapixels, just, you can do a lot more in Lightroom with 33 megapixels than you can the 12 megapixels off the A7S III. In every review I see on the A7 IV, they try to, well, I won't say they try, but the knock on the A7 IV is that the 4K 60 has a crop mode, which I don't care about. And there's always discussion about rolling shutter. And look, what's the deal with being so concerned about rolling shutter on these types of cameras? Because in order to demonstrate poor or good rolling shutter, you have to flail the camera about like you're having a seizure. I mean, I'm not shooting hummingbirds playing tennis. I don't know. Maybe it's me and my shooting style, but I'm never flying, whipping the camera around and panning and, and doing crazy stuff with it. I really don't get it. I don't get the big deal about rolling shutter. It's not even a consideration for me. Maybe if I was trying to track some fast action sports stuff for video, then it might end up being a problem, but I don't think I would use the camera for that specific of a thing where I'm going to run into trouble with the rolling shutter. And then I've seen a lot of comments of people talking about their A7 IV overheating. And I don't know, maybe there's a lot of people new to Sony and they've heard before, oh, the overheating, it overheats. Well, there was a generation of Sony bodies that were shooting 4K and they would overheat. But we're way past that. I mean, starting with the A7 III, you go in to your menus and you set your temp allowance to high, and your camera's not going to shut off on you. It may get warm, but it's not going to shut off. So I've seen people comment about, well, my A7 IV overheated and shut off and I couldn't use it. You got to go into the menus and turn your temp allowance to high. If you do that, you'll be fine. You're not going to damage your camera. I mean, unless you're shooting, I don't know, in the desert in the middle of summer, maybe eventually that's going to be a problem. But in most conditions, you know, your camera body is going to get warm after you're shooting, but you're not going to damage it. And another pro tip, if you're using one of these Sony bodies and you want a little bit more juice out of your battery, go into your menus and put it on airplane mode. A lot of people don't consider that, but there's no reason to have your Wi-Fi running from the camera and using up more power. Now, I don't know how much you save. It may be very minimal, but I think that's just one of the first easy things you could do is put it on airplane mode and you'll get a little bit more life out of your battery. But that tangent aside, I think the Sony A7 IV is clearly going to be a huge winner, and it is Sony's quote-unquote entry-level full-frame camera. And yeah, the A7 IV is $2,500 as of December of 2021, as opposed to the A7 III when it came out was $2,000. So it's a price jump for an entry-level camera, but it is way more advanced than the A7 III. And the body is better. It's more comfortable. You've got the fully articulating screen now, no 30-minute record time limit. You can do 4K 60 in it. I mean, there's so many improvements. I think I mentioned before, I was sentimental about my A7 III. I didn't want to let it go. We've been through a lot together. But as soon as I saw what the A7 IV was going to have and what it was going to be able to do, I was like, bye, see you later. And I got great value for it and was able to put it right to my A7 IV. And I think a lot of people will eventually do that if they haven't already. I mean, this camera is a serious upgrade. And I think anybody who wants to get into full frame hybrid shooting or media production of really any kind, A7 IV is going to be a great option. So yay, Christmas was great for me. I mean, I got to spend some great time with family. My oldest son stayed over on Christmas Eve, so he was with us on Christmas morning. These are wonderful things. I love everything about Christmas. I love my family, but I was just so happy about getting that A7 IV and being able to get pictures and video of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And I got to add a Samyang 85mm for my Blackmagic 6K Pro. My wife got me a new pair of Bose QC45 noise-canceling headphones, which are very key to my existence. I wear these headphones almost every waking moment of my life because I love just blocking out any outside sounds. I'm really annoyed by and sensitive about sounds, not in a debilitating way, but just kind of in a minor way, like leaf blowers or cars idling outside or anything like that. Those type of things that distract me from being creative or just being thoughtful about other things. It's easy for those sounds to really pull me out of that. So having these types of headphones are amazing for me. And I'm also a lot of the time consuming some sort of content, whether it be a podcast or a YouTube video, or I'm watching a movie and using these headphones to clearly hear those things while I'm doing other things. So thanks to my wife, Dre, who got me these headphones so that I can't hear her. And she also got the new Apple EarPods, the Pro or the whatever has the noise canceling for them. So now we can both walk around and just not hear each other at all, which really is what a successful marriage is all about, is it not? Right. Well, A7IV aside, I wanted to also talk about gear I've used and loved in 2021. And the first on this list would be the A7S III. And having used that for almost a year now, it is certainly my favorite piece of gear. And while something like an A7IV has more megapixels, may have a little bit snappier autofocus or whatever, the A7S III is more video-centric, and so am I. And I have to be that way professionally. So the A7S III has done some amazing work for me this year, and I can't say enough about being able to shoot in 4K, 120 frames per second. Having that option is just fantastic. It makes shooting B-roll so much more fun. Well, and it gives you way more options. And this sensor that Sony's using on the A7S III and the FX3, it's amazing. Beautiful color, right out of camera, just shooting standard. And I'm talking 8-bit. That's not even getting into the 422 10-bit options. I haven't even begun to shoot 10-bit color in the A7S III yet. And it's been a year, just because the things I have shot with it just don't require that much out of my editing to push the colors around like that. But I'm definitely looking forward to playing with 10-bit more in 2022. And along that same line, the FX3 is a piece of gear I have loved using this year. And a camera I never thought I would even want to own, had no interest in owning it when it was announced, but after shooting with the A7S III, I really wanted that same image quality off of a second body so that I could set up one camera for static interviews or whatever I have to do where I can't just easily pull the camera off, go shoot B-roll and come back. So I love having the FX3 as a camera living on a tripod and freeing me up with the A7S III to go shoot other things. But even when it's not locked down, it's a fun camera to use. With the mounting points they have on it, not having the viewfinder, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of this little rectangle that's still comfortable. The format or the form factor is still comfortable to use if you're running gunning with it, and it's got stabilization, so that's fine. I would say the one drawback for me with the FX3 is that the controls on the body are a little bit different than the other cameras. So muscle memory can throw you off trying to go to where your custom buttons are, do certain things. So there is a bit of a warming up to it as a body and the functions and the placement of the buttons. But I really do love it. I wouldn't change it. It's just a little bit different than obviously the other cameras. Is it worth almost $4,000? No, in my opinion. In fact, I think Sony shouldn't sell it with the audio handle, and it should be a little bit less expensive than the A7S III. But I still bought it, so clearly they have customers willing to buy this camera at that price. I actually don't see myself using the audio handle that comes with it because I'm always shooting second source sound anyways. And I don't have an interest in going XLR into the camera. Having multiple cameras and an audio recorder and everything, it's just not necessary for me. I can understand if the FX3 is your only camera, then that might make things a little bit easier for you to just run your audio right into your main camera and get into the edit and do that. But I like to put shotgun mics on all of my camera bodies as just backup audio, really, or to use for natural sound if necessary. And most of the time, if I'm capturing audio from somebody who's speaking, it's going to be on a Rode Wireless Go, or there's going to be a shotgun microphone set up to boom them and then maybe run that into an F6 or a sound devices. So just never been a big fan of your main audio is coming from a microphone mounted on your camera. Plus, if you're running audio and video into one device and something fails on the card or whatever, man, that's bad news, especially professionally. You end up with corrupted video or audio and you can't use it. That's a bad look. And I'm paranoid. So that's part of the reason why I shoot with multiple cameras, and I'm always collecting multiple audio sources. I am extremely paranoid about getting audio. And speaking of audio, I've got to mention, speaking of gear of 2021, this Zoom F6 is an audio recorder that everybody should own. Anybody who's into indie filmmaking or media production, content creation, the Zoom F6 does a lot of amazing things at a pretty good price. I believe, probably should have looked this up first, but I believe it's about $600, and it's worth every cent of that. Being able to record 32-bit float is a lifesaver, especially if you are a one-man crew on shoots. If you're having to direct and be the cinematographer and have your lighting set up and your audio going, like, something is bound to fail. And it's hard to ride your audio levels when you're that busy concentrating on other things. And if you're not constantly monitoring your audio, you can run into a lot of problems because people get loud or they get quieter. And once you've set that gain and you think you have the right level, things always change. So generally, you want someone to be able to monitor sound when you're recording so they can adjust the volume or the gain of the input level. Well, with 32-bit float, it's kind of like working with raw video where you can push and pull the colors and the exposure all over the place because there's so much data there. Well, with 32-bit float audio, you don't have to set the gain at all, and sounds that are very, very loud, you'll never clip. You'll always be able to bring them down, and sounds that are very quiet, you'll always be able to bring up without raising the noise floor as well. And it's like magic. It's like some sort of weird digital voodoo, but I absolutely love it. And I wish I would have had it making my last feature film, but it's certainly been a godsend working on anything since I've had the Zoom F6. And the same goes for my sound devices. I have a MixPre 6 Mark II by Sound Devices, and that's a great unit as well. I love it. And people swear by Sound Devices. They'll say, oh, it sounds way better than Zoom or anything like that. Well, I think between the Zoom F6 and these MixPres by Sound Devices, it's so close that it doesn't really matter. Really, for most things, it just doesn't matter. And while I like the MixPre 6, the Zoom F6, the form factor, fits into my bag really well, and it's an easier thing for me to operate. I find the buttons make more sense, and you don't really have to dig into the menu quite the same way you do with the MixPre. I don't know, just for me in my workflow, the Zoom F6 is a better fit than the Sound Devices. But both are certainly amazing. It's just that the F6, I think, is like half the price of a Sound Devices, MixPre 3, or the 6. So just way better value. So what, to recap, my gear that I've loved in 2021 has been the A7S III, the Sony FX3, the Zoom F6 field recorder, and then the other two items on my list that I felt were worth mentioning is one lens that I think I've probably shot the most with this year is my Sony 90mm f2.8 macro lens. My buddy Mark got this lens a while ago and was able to play with it, and I've always wanted to shoot with this glass. And there was never a ton of need for it, me mostly as a videographer. Like, photographers generally use those macro lenses more. And it's hard for me to justify photography-centric lenses to go buy, especially this lens, which is, I think the 90mm is like $1,000. So it's not crazy expensive, but it's not cheap either. And there are certainly cheaper options. But once I did have a need for macro video through work, I grabbed it and started shooting with it like crazy, and I absolutely love this lens. And what's really nice is that I love shooting on an 85 a lot. Like 85 is my favorite focal length. But in a pinch, if I have to decide which lenses I need to take with me on a shoot, the 90 is just more versatile, because not only can I get close to that 85 look if I need it, I can use the lens for the macro photography or videography. And it just gives you, obviously, it gives you a perspective that's hard to achieve from other types of lenses. And it's let me do just a ton of product photography in 2021 that I'd never really thought about doing before. But I got a light box and some things to play with to do product photography for clients and just for fun for other things, or like toy photography, which I always found very interesting and fun to do. And I haven't done anything elaborate, like set up scenes with rain or water or things like that for toy photography, but I've taken some of the things we have around the house and I've had a blast with the Sony 90mm. I always try to find a reason to bring it with me if I'm going to go on a gig, and it's really cool to have that macro perspective along with all of your other standard master, mids, and close-ups. And then almost to the extreme opposite of that, Sony dropped a 14mm f1.8 G Master lens this year, and I absolutely snatched that up because I love shooting super wide also. And I had been using the Tamron 17-28 f2.8, which is a fantastic lens. I was very happy with that. And usually if you're shooting wide, you don't need super shallow depth of field. So it's not really necessary to go with a bigger aperture than f2.8, or so I thought. Now, after using the 14mm G Master, wow, the difference in light is just mind-blowing to me. It's such a difference in quality of the image. Although, don't get me wrong, the Tamron 17-28 is an amazing lens. It's small, it's light, it's incredibly versatile. I personally think it's wide enough for interior real estate type of use, but the 14 is just a whole other universe. And I think the biggest benefit of the G Master is that it's got a much closer focus distance. Its close focusing distance really sets it apart and opens up all sorts of new opportunities to be creative. So initially I'm thinking, oh, cool, it's a little bit wider than the 17. It'll let in more light. G Master glass is always a win, almost. But being able to really get close up on a subject with that lens is what I find the most interesting. And it's made it a really fun piece of glass to use since I've had it this year. So those 5 things, the Sony A7S3, the Sony FX3, Zoom F6, the Sony 90mm macro lens, and the Sony 14mm G Master, these are my 5 favorite pieces of gear that I've used in 2021. And all of this gear would have been very helpful to have when I shot my most recent indie feature, which I will talk a little bit more about right now, just to say it is available on Amazon Prime Direct Video. The movie is called Madison Baker Was Here, and I won't get into a lot about the film on this particular episode, but I do want to say that I have some of the cast coming up on future episodes of Take 22, and they'll be talking about their experience working on the film. And I will talk a lot more about my experience developing and shooting and being in post-production and what's gone on since then. But for now, I just want to let everyone know it's called Madison Baker Was Here. It is a feature film. It's 100% indie, guerrilla filmmaking. And right now, if you watch it, you could see the extra special error edition. Because to meet the requirements for Amazon, I had to re-render the film to fit inside a acceptable aspect ratio box for them. Now, I didn't resize the film, but I just kind of changed it so that the film would fit within the aspect ratio they were asking for. And in doing that re-render, I didn't double check, and I completely forgot that I had some pickup shots that we added that were reframed on the timeline in post. And when I adjusted the project settings to re-render the film to fit inside their requested aspect ratio, it messed up those shots. And so if you watch the film right now, there are a handful of shots about midway through the film where you could see like this green outline box where I've manipulated the size of the frame and maybe the angle of the frame, so you will catch this little green outline or things like that. So it sucks. And what really sucks is that I submitted that render initially, and then within 24 hours, I realized the mistake. And I re-rendered and resubmitted the new mezzanine file version for Amazon. And that was probably mid-November, and here we are at the end of December, and they still haven't updated that file. So I was kind of trying to keep it on the down low that it was even out, because I don't want people's first impression to be with this size error on it. But you know what? This is part of being an independent filmmaker, and just something's bound to go sideways on you. And you know how, if you do this for a living, you know how renders are never the last render. You know, final version 1, final version 2, and last freaking final version, I swear to God, last freaking version, I swear to God, version 2. I mean, it just goes on and on. There's always a little something to change. But I say, let it be. And when Amazon gets around to swapping that out, hopefully they will do that. There's also a typo where I had left an E off of somebody's name in the credits, and that still hasn't been fixed. So I don't know. I'm really thrilled with Amazon for accepting the film and having it up. I mean, what a great opportunity for indie filmmakers to have their projects viewable. But this, to make any corrections, it seems like it takes an act of God. And I think it was a matter of 3 or 4 days from initially submitting to having the film on Amazon and ready to view. So that was really impressive. And shout out to Amazon Prime Direct Video for doing that. But just trying to fix this file, I don't know. There's nothing else I can do. I've emailed customer support like twice to say, can you have this done? And I'm still in the queue. So we'll see. But it's there. And it doesn't change the story of the film. It doesn't change anything about the film. And I think most people who watch it probably won't catch the framing issues when they pop up. They're not hugely distracting, but just to me as the perfectionist who doesn't want that there, it bothers me. And there's also an opportunity to hear a little bit more about how Madison Baker Was Here was created, what exactly sparked the idea, and a little bit about the layers within it. Or maybe you just want more awesome content. Check out the podcast Day Drinking with Scott and Colette, where in episode 263, Scott and Colette gave me an abundance of opportunity to discuss the film, and we got to talk about some of the influences for the story. Now, the podcast that Scott and Colette do, Day Drinking, it's all about television. Well, it covers everything. Network television, streaming. They talk about movies. They talk about classic movies. They really cover a wide range of entertainment. And Scott produces not only Day Drinking, but his own music podcast called The Ledge. And they have been known for years for hosting the Big Brother Gossip Show, where they watch the live feeds for CBS's Big Brother, and they really go in depth on telling you exactly what's really going on in the house, because the CBS show is such a cut up, produced version. you hardly ever get the real story. So I found listening to them was really entertaining and super interesting. And at some point in 2018, Colette was talking about these mittens, these things that she was knitting, and they're like gauntlets. And I'm no wardrobe specialist, so I can't exactly say what they are. They have come to be called cinnamits. I really love the look of them, and I thought they would be a perfect wardrobe piece for one of the characters in Madison Baker Was Here. So I reached out to Colette and asked her to knit one of these for the character. And she found an amazing color, just did an amazing job on these. We used them in the film, and I was so happy to have them. I wanted to give back a little in my own way, and I paid to be an executive producer of the Big Brother Gossip Show for the 2019 season. And a perk of doing that is Scott does a live read with anything that you give him. So he generously did this live read that promoted the Madison Baker Was Here Indiegogo campaign, which helped in the funding of production for the movie. And they were so nice to reach out to me this year and invite me to be on Day Drinking with Scott and Colette for the opportunity to chat with them and let their listeners hear about the film. So I will link their Patreon in the description box, and I highly recommend checking out Day Drinking with Scott and Colette. It's just a fun, warm conversation. You feel like you're in a room with friends talking about what you've been watching on TV. And what's really great about it, I think, is that the Scott and Colette are the ones doing all the hard work here. They're watching all of this content, and then they're telling you what they find interesting, what's good, what you should be watching. There's so much content out there. It's hard. It's nice to have a filter like that, or to at least put things on your radar that you may otherwise not know of. So shout out to Scott and Colette for letting me be on Day Drinking. And I think about 25 minutes into episode 263, you can hear my conversation with them, where you can learn some things about the film that I haven't said publicly or is not out there at all. So I hope those who are interested in the film go check that out, and then you get a little bit of insight about Madison Baker Was Here. And I'm going to talk so much more about this film and what it means and the people who were involved with it. I'm so proud that it even exists. And I'm so thankful to have gone through the process and had an opportunity to not only work with the people that I got to work with, but just learn and have more experience and get better at every little small aspect of filmmaking. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in wanting to be perfect or better and doubting ourselves and getting hung up on little things. I mean, so many things went on during production that were just annoying obstacles, and just in hindsight, what a wonderful opportunity to exercise those muscles as a director to get better at navigating and mitigating problems and trying to improve in all of the technical aspects and improve in the simple aspects of storytelling. And for the most part, I mean, I'm just talking about development and production right now. And there's so much more that went on in post-production and the impact that COVID had on everything that we had planned. And I'm looking forward to sharing about these experiences so that others can kind of either feel like you're not alone, or you can learn from mistakes we made, or maybe I have some helpful tips for you along the way. And I'm bringing it all up now to tell you, hey, if you're interested in seeing the movie, go to Amazon Prime Direct Video, search for Madison Baker Was Here, certainly buy it. Or just rent it. It doesn't matter. And watch it so that when I have the actors on to talk about their experiences, you have a little bit better reference of what they're talking about. And you can also go over to MadisonBakerWasHereMovie.com, and there's some behind-the-scenes stuff there. There's our original Indiegogo videos that we made when we were crowdfunding right at production. So go check it out. Watch the trailers, see some behind-the-scenes stuff, and get ready to hear from these girls next month as I'll start including their interviews in the Take 22 podcast. And that's it. I'm going to wrap it up. If you have any questions for me, you can email me directly at take22podcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at mentalityfilms. Again, I highly recommend subscribing to INDIEEYE Film Awards. The podcast, you can either subscribe to the channel on YouTube or the podcast from anywhere you listen to podcasts, because there will be some really great interviews from directors and actors, people who have been involved with INDIEEYE Film Awards this year, and there's some great insight that they're giving. Wonderful conversations I got to have with these people. And there will be way more shop talk starting next month. But I hope you had a Merry Christmas, hope you have a wonderful New Year, and there will be a lot of Take 22 in 2022. At least I hope so.
Thanks for listening to Take 22.